Humanity's battleship brings complete annihilation to the Council's doorstep. The first thing Grand Primarch Solvan said when our ship appeared on his sensors was, "That is not a warship, that is a funeral." He was talking about us. He was wrong. My name is Captain Lena Marsh, and I have been commanding the deep space vessel Iron Covenant for 11 months. I say deep space vessel, because that is what Earth's government called her in every public document, every press release, every diplomatic filing submitted to the Galactic Cooperative Council over the past 6 years. Deep Space Research Vessel, Survey Class, unarmed. A ship built for science and exploration, crewed by curious humans with no intention of starting trouble. None of that was true. Every word of it was a lie, and a very good one. I was standing on the bridge when we dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Council space, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the silence of empty space, which I had grown used to over years of service. This was a different kind of silence, the kind that happens when something unexpected appears and every person in the room holds their breath at the same time. My crew of 412 men and women had just spent 17 days in transit from Earth, and not one of them had slept well. Not because the journey was hard, because they all knew what came next. What came next was this: 4,000 Council warships arranged in a perfect sphere around a single point in space, and we had just jumped directly into the center of it. My navigation officer, a quiet man named Owen Cole, looked up from his console and said, "We are surrounded, Captain. 4,216 vessels. Estimated combined firepower is sufficient to reduce a medium-sized moon to gas in approximately 8 minutes. "Good," I said. They came prepared. He stared at me. Most of my crew stared at me. I did not explain myself. There was no time, and honestly, the explanation would not have made them feel better anyway. 11 days earlier, the Galactic Cooperative Council had delivered an ultimatum to Earth. The message had come through official diplomatic channels, translated into 43 human languages as a courtesy, and delivered personally by the Council's chief ambassador to the United Nations building in Geneva. The ambassador was a tall, gray-skinned Velorath named Primarch Solvan, and he had smiled throughout the entire meeting in the way that predators smile when they know the outcome is already decided. The terms were simple. Humanity would surrender all colonial territories beyond the Sol system, numbering 47 inhabited worlds and 11 active mining stations. Humanity would dismantle its military fleet, which the Council described as a minor collection of outdated vessels unworthy of serious concern. Humanity would accept a Council-appointed governing oversight committee that would manage Earth's affairs going forward, for the benefit of all parties. Humanity had 72 hours to comply. 72 hours. The Council had done this 6 times before. 6 other species had received this same message. 5 had complied immediately. 1 had refused. That species no longer existed as a free civilization. Their people were now listed in the Council's records as protected dependents, which was a polite way of saying they owned nothing, decided nothing, and existed entirely at the Council's pleasure. Earth's government met for 4 hours. There was debate. There was argument. There were speeches about caution and reason and the value of human life and the importance of not provoking a superior force. All of those speeches were heard. All of those speakers were listened to with respect. And then the Council's message was officially declined. No counteroffer, no negotiation request, no diplomatic language, just a clean, clear, one-word response transmitted back through official channels. Declined. I was told about this decision while sitting in the captain's chair of the Iron Covenant, already 3 days into our journey toward Council space. I read the transmission, set it down on my console, and said nothing for about 30 seconds. Then I asked Owen to confirm our arrival trajectory and went back to work. The Galactic Cooperative Council, upon receiving Earth's response, did what powerful organizations always do when a smaller party refuses to cooperate. They escalated. 4,000 ships were mobilized and positioned at the edge of human space within 48 hours. Grand Primarch Solvan, now commanding the fleet personally from his flagship, sent a second message. This one was shorter. It contained no diplomatic language at all. It said, simply, that humanity had one final opportunity to comply before the fleet advanced. Earth sent no second response. Earth sent us. And now we were here, sitting in the exact center of 4,000 enemy ships, and my communications officer, a young woman named Claire Abbott, turned from her station and said, "Grand Primarch Solvan is hailing us, Captain. He sounds confused." "Put him through," I said. The main view screen filled with the image of Solvan. He was tall, gray-skinned, and immaculately dressed in the deep blue uniform of Council Command. He had the kind of face that had never once been told no, and had therefore developed no muscle memory for how to react to it. He looked at me. He looked at the bridge of the Iron Covenant behind me. He looked at the sensor readings his own crew had presumably just handed him. "You are one ship," he said. "Yes," I said. "We are 4,216 ships." "I know," my navigation officer counted. There was a pause. Solvan leaned slightly forward. "Is this a gesture? A symbolic act of defiance? I want to understand what you believe you are accomplishing here." I thought about how to answer that honestly and simply. "You sent an ultimatum to Earth," I said. "Earth declined. You escalated. We were sent to respond to the escalation. That is what is happening here. There is no symbolism. This is a direct and practical response to your actions. You are one ship," he said again. His voice had a tone in it now that I recognized. It was the tone of someone who was starting to feel that something was not right, but could not yet identify what. "Yes," I said, for the second time. "Your vessel is listed in our records as a survey craft, unarmed, scientific mission." "That is what it says in our public documents," I agreed. The silence that followed that sentence was 3 full seconds long, and in those 3 seconds, I watched Grand Primarch Solvan's face do something very interesting. It changed. The comfortable confidence that had been sitting there, settled and heavy like furniture in a room that never gets rearranged, shifted, just slightly, just enough. His science officer said something to him in the Velarath language that our translation system caught and converted in real time. The words appeared on a small screen to my left, visible only to me. The translation read, "Sir, their power readings do not match their filed specifications. I am getting anomalous readings from several sections of the vessel that do not correspond to any known survey class design. I cannot identify what I am looking at." Solvan did not know I could read that. I let nothing show on my face. He looked back at the screen, and for the first time in what I suspected was a very long time, Grand Primarch Solvan asked a question he did not already know the answer to. "What exactly," he said, slowly and carefully, "is that ship?" My weapons officer, a steady man named Patrick Grant, caught my eye from across the bridge. He had been watching the exchange. He gave me a very small nod. I looked back at Solvan. "The Galactic Cooperative Council," I said, keeping my voice level and clear, "has spent 40 years watching humanity and concluding that we are a minor species, unimportant, manageable. You watched us develop and decided we were not a threat. You read our public records, monitored our declared military capabilities, observed our behavior in diplomatic settings, and built a very complete picture of who we are." I paused. "That picture is wrong," I said. "It has always been wrong. We let you build it because it was useful to us. And now we are here, and I am going to give you one opportunity to reconsider every assumption your fleet is currently operating under." Solvan straightened. The comfortable expression tried to come back. It almost made it. "Captain," he said, with patience that I recognized as performed, "you are one ship. Your vessel is 12 kilometers long, which is impressive by human standards. I will grant you that. But my fleet alone carries enough firepower to—" "Grand Primarch," I said, interrupting him politely, "before you finish that sentence, I want you to look at your sensor readings one more time." He glanced to his side, at something off-screen. He looked at whatever his crew had just updated. He looked back at me. Something in his face went very still. "That is not possible," he said quietly. "It took us 6 years," I said. 11,000 engineers. 23 facilities across 9 planets. We are very patient when we need to be, and we had a great deal of motivation." Claire turned from her communication station. "Captain, the fleet is beginning targeting procedures." "Let them," I said. Owen looked at me from navigation. A young ensign near the back of the bridge made a small sound that might have been a question and might have been something else entirely. I did not look away from the screen. "Grand Primarch," I said. I want to be very clear about something before this goes any further. We did not come here to negotiate. Earth already declined your terms. We came here to demonstrate something, and after the demonstration is complete, you will have a choice to make. I would strongly encourage you to think carefully about that choice. Solvan stared at me for a long moment. Your single ship, he said, against my 4,000. Yes, I said, for the third time. And then his fleet opened fire. I had read every analysis our intelligence teams produced about the Council's weapons technology. I had reviewed every engagement report from the 5 species who had resisted before surrendering. I had spent 3 months in simulator training before we launched, running scenario after scenario with Patrick and the weapons team, working through every possible opening move the Council fleet might make. None of it fully prepared me for what it looked and felt like to absorb the opening strike of 4,000 warships at the same time. The Iron Covenant shook. There is no other word for it. The ship shook the way a very large, very deep bell shakes when something strikes it. I felt the vibration in my feet, in my chair, in my back teeth. The lights on the bridge flickered once, then steadied. The sound that reached us from outside was wrong, and enormous, and then gone, swallowed by the vacuum that surrounded us on all sides. Damage report, I said. My chief engineer, a woman named Helen Burke who had been standing against the rear wall of the bridge with both arms crossed, and an expression of absolute concentration on her face, checked her secondary console and said, "Shield integrity at 91%. Hull integrity 100%. No internal damage. All systems nominal." The bridge was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then Claire said, from her communications station, "I am picking up transmissions from the Council fleet, Captain. Their tactical network is active. They are discussing the results." "What are they saying?" I asked. She listened. The translation system fed her the output. Her expression shifted in a way that was hard to describe, somewhere between disbelief and something that might have been satisfaction. "They are saying," she said carefully, "that their sensors are showing no significant damage to our vessel. They are asking each other if there was a malfunction in the firing sequence. Several ships are running diagnostics on their own weapons systems." Owen turned from navigation. "They think their weapons misfired." "They think their weapons misfired," I confirmed, because the alternative explanation, that we absorbed a full coordinated strike from 4,000 ships and lost 9% of our shields, does not fit inside any model they have built of what a human vessel can do. Patrick spoke from the weapons station. His voice was calm, the way very focused people are calm when they are doing something they have prepared for extensively. "Captain, your order? 4,000 ships, 4,000 crews who had just watched their best opening strike produce almost no visible result." I thought about what Solvan had said. 1 ship against 4,000. I thought about the 6 species. I thought about what it means to be manageable. "Return fire," I said. "Primary kinetic array. 3 rounds. I want precision, not destruction. Pick targets that are positioned away from the densest formations." "Understood," Patrick said. The Iron Covenant had been listed in Council records as an unarmed survey vessel. The primary kinetic array alone ran for 8 kilometers along the spine of the ship. The rounds it fired were not energy-based, which was what every Council weapon model predicted a ship of our supposed class would carry. They were physical projectiles, dense and enormous, accelerated to a significant fraction of the speed of light by a sequence of magnetic stages that our engineers had spent 4 years perfecting. The targeting system that guided them had been calibrated over 11 months of deep space transit. The round travels too fast to track. That is the point. By the time sensors register the launch, the target is already gone. 3 Council destroyers vanished from the tactical display. Not damaged, not disabled, not retreating. Gone. The bridge of the Iron Covenant was very quiet. I was watching the main display, which showed the Council fleet as a dense sphere of green signals around our single blue marker. I watched 3 of those green signals disappear from the field simultaneously, and the whole sphere seemed to pause, like a breath being held. Claire pressed her earpiece. "I am getting a great deal of communication from the fleet now, Captain. Multiple channels, all active at once." "Summarize," I said. She listened for several seconds. "They are trying to determine what hit their ships. They cannot find the projectiles on any sensor record. Several fleet commanders are asking their science officers what weapon system produces no energy signature on launch. There is significant disagreement. She paused. Grand Primarch Solvan is attempting to restore order on the tactical channel. He is telling fleet commanders to hold position. Is the fleet holding? Owen asked. For now, Claire said. But 3 of the outer ring commanders are already adjusting their positions. They are not retreating. They are... She listened again. They are trying to find an angle that makes them harder to target. Patrick looked at me. Shall I demonstrate that there is no such angle? Not yet, I said. Give them a moment. I wanted them to have a moment. I wanted Solvan to have time to look at his sensor readings, to look at the space where 3 of his destroyers used to be, to look at the Iron Covenant sitting in the center of his fleet, with its shields barely touched, and its systems entirely nominal, and to begin the process of revising every assumption he had carried into this engagement. That process needed time to start. Once it started, the rest of the conversation would go differently. The communication request came 60 seconds later. Solvan appeared on the view screen again. He was still in his command chair. He was still wearing his perfectly pressed uniform. But something had left his face. The particular quality of confidence that had been there before. The settled certainty of a person who has already calculated the outcome and is simply waiting for events to confirm the calculation. That was gone. What was in its place was something much more interesting. He was thinking. Your ship, he said, is not what it is listed as. No, I agreed. Those 3 vessels. Gone, I said simply. I want to be clear, that was a minimal response. 3 ships out of 4,000. I gave that order to demonstrate capability, not intent. We have not decided to destroy your fleet, Grand Primarch. We have decided to show you that we can. He was quiet. How? He asked. I recognized the question for what it was. It was not a tactical question. He was not asking for specifications or technical details. He was asking the real question, the one underneath all the other questions, the one that had no military answer. How had we built this without them knowing? How had humanity, a species they had assessed as manageable and minor, constructed something that sat in the center of 4,000 ships and absorbed their combined opening strike with 9% shield degradation? How had they been so completely wrong? Carefully, I said, and over a very long time. He stared at me. I let him stare. My fleet still has 4,000 ships, he said, and I could hear him trying to locate the confidence that had been there before. Reaching for it, the way you reach for something in a dark room when you are not certain it is still where you left it. 4,213, Owen corrected quietly from navigation, which made Claire press her lips together to keep from smiling. I did not correct Owen. Solvan heard the correction. His jaw tightened. Captain Marsh, he said, and his voice had taken on a different quality now. Something more careful, more deliberate. I want to understand your position precisely. You are 1 ship. Even if your capabilities are significantly beyond what we anticipated, the mathematics of this engagement do not favor you. Grand Primarch, I said, I would like you to do something for me. I would like you to review the engagement data your tactical team has just collected. Not the parts about the 3 ships we removed from the field. The other parts. The sensor readings from the Iron Covenant itself. He glanced to the side. Waited, looked back. Our power readings, he said slowly, do not correspond to any known vessel configuration. No, I said, they do not, because the Iron Covenant is not a known vessel configuration. She is a new one, and what your sensors are reading as anomalous power output from various unidentified sections of this ship are those sections preparing, right now, to demonstrate their functions if this conversation does not go in a productive direction. The silence was different this time, fuller. I let it sit. I want to propose something, I said, before either side makes a decision that becomes impossible to reverse. I want to propose that we talk, not about terms, because Earth's position on the Council's terms is already on record, but about what is actually happening here, about what you are looking at, about what your fleet has just discovered about humanity, and what that discovery should mean for how this situation proceeds. Solvan was quiet for a long time. His science officer said something to him off-screen. The translation appeared on my small side screen again. It said, "Sir, I have completed the preliminary analysis of the Iron Covenant's power signature. The readings from the forward and lateral sections are consistent with weapon systems. I cannot determine the type or yield, because nothing in our database corresponds to the signature. What I can tell you is that the power being drawn by those systems is very large. It is larger than the total output of this flagship. Solvan did not look at me for a moment after reading that. When he did, something had settled in his expression. Not comfort, not the old confidence. Something else. Something that looked, if I was reading it correctly, like the beginning of a very serious reassessment. "Very well," he said. "We will talk." "Thank you," I said. Patrick, from the weapons station, gave me a small nod. Helen, at the rear of the bridge, uncrossed her arms. The fleet outside held position. 4,213 ships, all pointed at us, all waiting. And I began to explain to Grand Primarch Solvan exactly what he was looking at. The conversation began in silence on Solvan's end, and in very specific, careful words on mine. I did not threaten him. I want to be clear about that, because the word threat implies a kind of emotional quality that I was not using. I was not angry. I was not performing strength or trying to humiliate him. I was simply describing reality, which is a different thing entirely. The Iron Covenant was built in 6 years, I told him. Not in a single facility, because a single facility would have been too visible. We built her in 23 separate locations across 9 planetary systems, in sections, under cover of legitimate research and construction projects. The sections were transported individually to a deep space assembly point beyond the range of any council monitoring system. The full assembly took 14 months. Solvan listened. He had stopped trying to project confidence and had started listening, which I considered progress. The crew of 412, I continued, were selected over a period of 3 years from human military, engineering, and scientific fields. Each of them signed agreements that included permanent information restrictions. None of them spoke about this ship, this mission, or any detail connected to either, to anyone outside the program. Not family, not friends, not under any circumstances. They honored that completely. "Why?" Solvan asked. It was a genuine question. Why the secrecy? Why did humanity conceal this from the Council for 6 years? I looked at him for a moment before answering, because the answer required honesty that I wanted to deliver precisely. "Because we were watching," I said. "We watched you absorb the Quethali people 40 years ago. We watched you absorb the Drasil 17 years ago. We watched you absorb the Yevish, the Sorum, the Palandi, and the Korath. 6 species. All of them listed in your records as protected dependents. All of them living under governance they did not choose, on worlds they no longer control, under terms they were never asked to agree to." I paused. "We were watching the pattern," I said, "and we were building the thing that would interrupt it." Solvan's expression was unreadable in the way that expressions become unreadable when there are too many things happening behind them at once. "You planned for this," he said. "Yes," I said. "For a long time. You planned for the ultimatum specifically." "We planned for the inevitability of an ultimatum," I said. "We did not know exactly when it would come. We knew it would come. The Council's pattern of behavior is consistent and well documented. When a species reaches a certain level of development and expansion, the Council sends a message. We read the history carefully. We made our preparations accordingly." There was a long pause. "What is on this ship?" Solvan asked. I had expected this question. I had discussed with my crew how much to reveal and when. We had decided that partial information was more useful than complete concealment, because partial information would allow Solvan to do his own extrapolation, and his own extrapolation would almost certainly produce estimates that were worse than the reality. That was intentional. "The primary kinetic array," I said, "runs 8 kilometers along the spine of the ship. You have already seen what 3 rounds from that system do. The array is capable of sustained fire." I paused. "The lateral sections your science officer identified as anomalous contain swarm deployment bays. The Iron Covenant carries a significant number of autonomous combat units, small, fast, and individually programmed for independent operation. They can be deployed in under 30 seconds. Solvan was very still. "The forward section," I continued, contains a long-range strike system that we developed specifically for this mission. It operates on a different principle than our kinetic array. It is not faster. It is not more powerful. What it is precise at distances that make interception essentially impossible. I let that settle. The sections your sensors cannot identify, I said, are the ones I am not going to describe, not because I am trying to be dramatic, because I think it is better for everyone in this situation if the Council fleet continues to be uncertain about what else this ship can do. Uncertainty, in this context, is a form of restraint. It gives your commanders a reason not to try things. Solvan leaned forward slightly. You are telling me these things deliberately, he said. You are controlling what you reveal. Yes, I said. Why? Because I want you to make a good decision, I said. And good decisions require accurate information about the situation you are actually in. You came into this engagement with one picture of reality. That picture was wrong. I am giving you a more accurate one. Not the complete one. That would not be in anyone's interest, but accurate enough. He was quiet for almost a minute. His chief tactical officer, whose voice I could hear but not see, said something to him. The translation system caught it. It said, "Sir, the vessel's power output has continued to increase during this conversation. The forward section in particular is drawing significantly more energy than it was during the initial engagement. Whatever that system is, it is charging or preparing." Solvan looked at me, and I looked at him, and neither of us said anything for a moment. "I want to ask you something directly," he said at last. "Go ahead," I said. "Can this ship defeat my fleet?" I had also expected this question. I had thought about how to answer it honestly without being reckless. I had settled on the following. "Grand Primarch," I said, "the honest answer is that I do not know. 4,000 ships is a very large force, and this is a very large universe, and I have been doing this long enough to know that anyone who claims certainty about the outcome of a battle before it happens is either lying or has not thought about it carefully enough. What I can tell you with complete confidence is this. The cost of finding out would be catastrophic for your fleet, and there would be no point at which the Iron Covenant would surrender or retreat. We are not here to test that outcome. We are here to make it unnecessary." Solvan sat back. He looked at something off-screen for a long moment. Then he looked back and said, "What does humanity want from this encounter?" And that was when the real conversation began. I had 3 things to say. I had prepared them carefully, because the words mattered, and because this was the part of the mission that would determine whether everything that came before it meant anything at all. First, I said, the 6 species, the Quethali, the Drasil, the Yevish, the Soram, the Palandi, and the Korath. They are to be released from Council dependency status. Their territorial rights are to be restored. Their governing authority is to be returned to them without conditions. This is not negotiable. Solvan's expression flickered. Second, I said, the Council's ultimatum to humanity is withdrawn, permanently. Earth's colonial territories, Earth's military capability, Earth's governing sovereignty. These are not subjects for Council discussion, now or in the future. The flickering in his expression had become something more complex. Third, I said, the Council will acknowledge, formally and on the record, that the policy of absorption has ended, not paused, not suspended pending review, ended. No further species will be processed under that framework. Silence. Those are the terms, I said. They are not opening positions. They are the terms. Solvan looked at me for a very long time. You understand, he said slowly, that what you are describing would fundamentally alter the structure of the Council. Yes, I said. I understand that. Several Council members would never agree. Grand Primarch, I said, as gently as I could while being completely clear. I did not ask what the Council would agree to. I told you what the terms are. The agreement part is the Council's responsibility to work out internally. The tactical officer's voice came again, off-screen. This time Solvan did not look away from me. The translation on my side screen read, Sir, I am now reading 37 distinct weapon signatures active on the human vessel. I cannot classify 22 of them. The forward section has reached what appears to be full charge. I strongly recommend we do not escalate. I watched Solvan receive that information without breaking eye contact with me. He was a proud man. I could see that. The kind of man who had spent decades making decisions that other people had to accept, who had arrived at this encounter fully expecting it to go the way every other encounter in his career had gone. The kind of man for whom being in the wrong feels like falling off something very tall, with no warning at all. I did not enjoy watching that. I am going to need time, he said at last. You have 12 hours, I said. That is not enough time to... I know, I said. It will have to do. He considered me. And if the answer is no? He asked. I had prepared for this question too. I had thought about it a great deal. I had decided that honesty, here at this moment, was more important than strategy. Then we will demonstrate more of what the Iron Covenant can do, I said quietly. And after the demonstration, you will have another opportunity to reconsider. I would rather not reach that stage. Neither would you. 12 hours, Grand Primarch. I closed the channel. Owen looked at me from navigation. Claire had her earpiece pressed tight and was monitoring fleet communications. Patrick had his hands on his station and had not taken them off since the engagement began. Helen, at the rear of the bridge, had crossed her arms again, which I had learned was what she did when she was concentrating hard and did not want to be interrupted. They are not dispersing, Claire reported. Fleet holding position. No weapons charging on the Council ships. Communication volume on their internal network is very high. They are talking to each other, I said. Yes, she said. Good, I said. Let them talk. I stood up from the captain's chair and walked to the main viewport at the front of the bridge. The viewport showed me the stars and the distant glitter of the Council fleet arranged around us in every direction. Thousands of ships, a sphere of force that had never failed to achieve its purpose in 40 years of operation. I stood there and looked at it, and thought about a woman named Dr. Grace Obi, who had been the chief weapons architect on the Iron Covenant project. She had come to see me 3 months before launch, in a meeting room in a facility whose location I am not at liberty to mention, and she had sat across from me with her hands folded on the table, and said something that I had thought about many times since. She had said, Captain, I want you to understand something about this ship. I did not design her to win an engagement. I designed her to make an engagement unnecessary. There is a difference. Winning means someone else loses. Making an engagement unnecessary means everyone goes home. That second outcome is much harder to engineer than the first. I spent 2 of the 6 years on that problem. I think I solved it. I need you to give the solution the space to work. I had thought about those words many times since launch. I thought about them now, looking at 4,000 ships and an uncertain Grand Primarch, and 12 hours that would decide a great deal about what kind of galaxy we were all going to live in going forward. Give the solution the space to work. I turned from the viewport. Owen, I said, keep monitoring fleet movements. Claire, I want to know immediately if anything changes on their tactical network. Patrick, staying at the station, Patrick said, before I could finish. Helen, I said. Already checking everything twice, she said, from the rear of the bridge. I nodded. Then we wait, I said. The first 4 hours were quiet. I do not mean there was nothing happening. The Council fleet was maintaining position, which required constant maneuvering. Claire was tracking an enormous volume of encrypted communication between Council ships. Patrick was running continuous passive scans of the fleet, watching for any sign that individual commanders were repositioning for tactical advantage. Owen was monitoring our own systems, checking and rechecking every reading. But quiet is not about sound. Quiet is about whether the situation is changing, and for 4 hours, the situation did not change. I used the time to write in my mission log, which I had been keeping since launch. The entries were detailed and straightforward, written in clear language that any person reading them afterward would be able to understand. I wrote about the engagement, about the exchange with Solvan, about the terms I had laid out. I wrote about the crew, about how they had performed, about what I observed in each of them during the most difficult parts. Then, in the middle of writing about Owen's calm during the opening strike, something happened. One of the Outer Ring Council commanders made a decision that his Grand Primarch had not authorized. I would learn later, from intercepted communications, that this commander's name was Sub-Primarch Vareth, and that he had been convinced, in the 4 hours of fleet-wide discussion, that the entire situation was a bluff. He had argued, apparently at length, that a single human vessel, no matter how unusual its capabilities, could not realistically threaten a fleet of 4,000 ships. He had argued that Grand Primarch Solvan was being manipulated into passivity by a human captain with impressive shields and an impressive kinetic weapon, but nothing else of consequence. He had argued that the correct response was an immediate full-fleet coordinated strike, and that any hesitation was a tactical error. He lost the argument, but he did not let losing the argument stop him. Sub-Primarch Vareth's ship, along with 11 others under his direct command, began moving toward the Iron Covenant at attack speed. Not the full fleet. 12 ships, acting on the authority of one commander who had decided the situation called for decisive action. Claire caught it first. "Captain, 12 vessels on the outer ring are breaking formation. Attack bearing. Closing at high speed." Patrick was already reading the same data. "Weapons hot on all 12. They are arming, Captain." I walked back to the captain's chair. I was not angry. I want to be clear about that. What I felt, in that moment, was something closer to sadness, because 12 ships meant 12 crews, and crews are not policy. Crews are people who follow orders, and Sub-Primarch Vareth had given them an order, and they were following it, and they did not know what they were moving toward. "Patrick," I said, "swarm deployment, defensive configuration, non-destructive intercept, if achievable." "Understood," Patrick said. The Iron Covenant opened 48 bays along her lateral sections simultaneously. What came out of them is difficult to describe if you have not seen it. Our design team had named them tactical drones, which is technically accurate but does not capture what they actually look like in motion. They are small, fast, and extraordinarily maneuverable. They operate independently, guided by programming developed over 3 years. When they were deployed in simulations, the test opponents described the experience as being surrounded by something alive. 1,200 drones deployed in 22 seconds. They did not fire. I had said non-destructive intercept, and the programming responded to that instruction. Instead, they surrounded the 12 advancing ships the way water surrounds an object dropped into it, flowing around and between and above and below, filling every angle of approach. The 12 ships found themselves encased in a sphere of small, fast-moving objects that were matching their every course correction with perfect precision. The 12 ships stopped. Not because they were destroyed. Not because they were disabled. Because their commanders looked at their sensor readings and understood, in a very immediate and physical way, that they were completely and comprehensively surrounded by something they could not outmaneuver, and that continuing to advance would require making a decision they did not actually want to make. 12 ships stopped. The remaining 4,201 held their positions. Claire said, very quietly, "I am picking up communication from Sub-Primarch Vareth's ship to the Grand Primarch's flagship. The translation is," she paused, "apologetic." Owen made a small sound that might have been a laugh and caught himself. I allowed myself a single moment to close my eyes and breathe. Then I opened them and looked at the main display, where 1,200 blue markers were holding a perfect sphere around 12 green ones, and the rest of the Council fleet was watching from a distance, and the Iron Covenant was sitting exactly where she had been since we dropped out of faster-than-light travel many hours ago, undamaged, fully operational, and very patient. "Patrick," I said, "recall the swarm on my mark. Slow withdrawal. Give them room." "Ready," Patrick said. "Mark," I said. The 1,200 drones withdrew in a single coordinated movement, flowing back toward the Iron Covenant the way they had come, and the 12 Council ships were free. The 12 ships did not resume their attack. They returned to their positions in the outer ring. Solvan hailed me 40 minutes later. He looked different from the first time I had seen him, not broken. I want to be precise about this. He was not a man who had been defeated. He was a man who had arrived at the end of a very long and difficult recalculation, and had come out somewhere he had not expected to be, and was now trying to decide how to live there. "Captain Marsh," he said. "Grand Primarch," I said. "I have been in communication with the full council," he said. "It has been a difficult conversation." "I imagine it has," I said. "There is agreement on the first 2 of your terms," he said. "The 6 species, and the withdrawal of the ultimatum regarding Earth. These are difficult concessions, but they are concessions the Council is willing to make." I waited. "The 3rd term," he said. The formal end of the absorption policy. The resistance to this is significant. There are council members who believe this policy is essential to stability, that without it— Grand Primarch, I said, I am going to tell you something that I do not say often, because it is not usually the right thing to say. I am going to say it now because I believe you are capable of hearing it honestly, and I think it is the most important thing in this conversation. He waited. The 6 species that were absorbed, I said, are living proof that the absorption policy does not produce stability. It produces dependency. It produces resentment. It produces civilizations that have been stripped of their agency and are existing rather than living. The policy is not about stability. It is about the Council's comfort with having fewer things in the galaxy that it cannot control. He was very quiet. What humanity is asking for, I said, is not the end of the Council. We are not asking you to dissolve, to disarm, or to give up influence or authority. We are asking you to stop doing the specific thing that has done the most damage to the most people. That is all. Just stop doing that one thing. Everything else can remain. He looked at me for a long time. You are very certain, he said at last. Yes, I said. What if you are wrong? About what? About what we can afford to give up, he said. About what stability requires. About the consequences of the policy ending. I thought about that question honestly before answering. Then we will both find out, I said, and we will deal with what we find. But Grand Primarch, you have already found out what the consequences of the policy continuing look like. 6 species, 40 years. That is not stability. That is just a longer word for the same problem. He was quiet for almost 2 minutes. I let him be quiet. Finally, he said, the Council will require a formal process, a structured agreement, witnessed by neutral parties. It will take time. I know, I said. We are not leaving until it is done. Something moved in his expression. Not warmth, exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something that might have been, in a creature who had spent decades in the machinery of power, the very first movement toward something like respect. No, he said. I did not imagine you were. He closed the channel. I sat in the captain's chair and did not say anything for a moment. Then Helen, from the rear of the bridge, said, the formal process is going to take at least 6 months. Yes, I said. We have supplies for 8, she said. I know, I said. Someone, she said, in the voice of a person who had planned very carefully, for a very long time, planned ahead. Yes, I said. Someone did. The formal agreement took 4 months and 11 days. I did not expect it to be clean. Negotiations involving 14 sovereign civilizations, 6 recovering species, and a humanity that was still being discovered by a galaxy that had fundamentally misunderstood it. That kind of negotiation is not clean. It is slow and detailed and difficult and full of moments where everything threatens to collapse, and people who were born to be certain about things are forced to be uncertain for the first time. There were moments when I thought it would fail. There was a 7-day period in the 2nd month when 3 council member species simultaneously declared their intention to withdraw from the process entirely. There was a day in the 3rd month when one of the 6 freed species, the Yevish, transmitted a message to Earth calling for punitive action against their former absorbers, and the Council received that message and interpreted it as proof that the freed species were a destabilizing force, and that perhaps the policy had been justified after all. There was a morning in the 4th month when Solvan came to the communication channel, looking exhausted in a way that was visible even across thousands of kilometers, and said, very quietly, that he was not certain the agreement could survive its final stage. I listened to all of it. I did not panic. I did not escalate. I did not threaten. Every time the process threatened to collapse, I did the same thing. I asked careful questions. I listened to the answers, and I found the specific part of the problem that needed attention, and gave it my attention. The Iron Covenant stayed where she was. 4,000 ships, plus reinforcements that arrived in the 2nd month, surrounded us the entire time. They stayed at a respectful distance. They did not fire again. They did not maneuver aggressively. They stayed, and I stayed, and the process continued, because both sides understood that the alternative to the process was something no one wanted to experience directly. The agreement, when it was finally signed, was 47 pages long in its complete form. I am not going to summarize all of it, but the essential pieces were these. The 6 absorbed species were formally released from dependency status, effective immediately. Their territorial rights were restored. Their governing authority was returned to them, with a 2-year period during which Council economic support would continue at existing levels to allow for the transition. After 2 years, that support would end, and each species would operate as a fully independent member of the galactic community. The Council's absorption policy was formally abolished. The mechanism by which it had operated, the legal framework, the administrative structure, the treaty language that had enabled it, was dissolved and removed from Council documentation. A formal acknowledgement was entered into the permanent record that the policy had caused harm and would not be resumed. Earth's sovereignty, territories, and military capability were explicitly recognized and guaranteed by Council Charter. The ultimatum was formally withdrawn and noted in the record as having been an error. There was one more piece. At Earth's request, and after significant discussion, a new provision was added to the Council Charter. Any species facing an ultimatum or absorption threat from the Council, or any affiliated party, could formally request a review by a newly created independent tribunal. The tribunal would include representatives from all 14 Council species and from 3 non-Council civilizations, selected by the freed species. It would have binding authority to reject Council actions it determined to be harmful. It was not a perfect solution. No solution involving that many competing interests ever is. But it was a real one. It had binding authority. It had structure. It had, for the first time in 40 years, a mechanism for something other than compliance. On the day the agreement was signed, I was on the bridge of the Iron Covenant, watching the digital signature of Grand Primarch Sylvan appear on the formal document on my screen. He had aged visibly in 4 months. The confident comfort that had been in his face when we first spoke was gone, and I did not think it was coming back, and I did not feel triumphant about that. I felt something quieter. Claire, who had been monitoring Council communications throughout, said, "Fleet movement, Captain. The Council ships are," she paused, checked her reading. "They are withdrawing. In formation. Organized withdrawal. All vessels." Owen confirmed it from navigation. 4,000 plus assorted reinforcements. All moving away from our position. Estimated time to full withdrawal from this system, 6 hours. I watched the green signals on the tactical display begin to move. Slowly at first, then with increasing purpose. The sphere that had surrounded us for 4 months and 11 days began to unravel like a pattern drawn in sand when the tide comes in. Ship by ship, then squadron by squadron, then in great organized groups, the Council fleet withdrew. The Iron Covenant stayed where she was. I watched the display until the last green signal disappeared from sensor range. The system was quiet around us. Just stars and the Iron Covenant, and 412 human beings who had come an enormous distance and done something that had never been done before. Patrick, from the weapons station, said, "All systems nominal. No hostile contacts in sensor range." Helen, from the rear of the bridge, said, "Engineering is reporting full operational status." She held up well. Owen said, "Navigation is ready on your order, Captain." Claire said softly, "Earth is on the channel. They are asking for a status report." I sat for a moment in the captain's chair and looked at the view screen, which showed me the unobstructed stars of Council space, now empty of everything except light. "Tell Earth the following," I said. "Agreement signed. Terms met on all 3 points. Fleet withdrawn. Iron Covenant operational and ready to return. Mission complete." Claire transmitted the message. The response from Earth came back in 4 minutes, which was fast for the distance involved, which meant someone on the other end had been watching very closely and had their reply ready. The response was 3 words. "Come home, Lena." I looked at those 3 words on the screen. Owen was already calculating the return trajectory. Helen was running pre-jump systems checks. Patrick was powering down the active weapon signatures that had been running continuously for 4 months and 11 days, and the Iron Covenant was quietly releasing a kind of tension she had been holding for the entire mission. Systems relaxing the way a person relaxes when the difficulty is genuinely over. I thought about the 6 species, about people who had spent 40 years living under governance they did not choose, waking up one morning to news that it had ended. I thought about the Quethali elder who had stood in a receiving hall in Council space 2 months earlier, when the first formal delegation of freed species representatives had come to witness the opening of negotiations, and who had held my hand and said nothing for a long time. I thought about Dr. Obi in her meeting room. Give the solution the space to work. I thought about a junior crew member named Evan Price, who had been on his first deep space deployment and had celebrated his 24th birthday on the bridge during the second month of negotiations, and had seemed genuinely surprised when the rest of the crew had appeared with something that Helen had improvised from the galley supplies and presented as a cake. I thought about the fact that we had done this without losing anyone. 4 months and 11 days in the center of 4,000 enemy ships, and every one of the 412 people on this ship was going home. I was not triumphant. I want to say that again, because I think it matters. The word for what I felt was not triumph. Triumph implies something was defeated, and that is not quite right for what had happened here. What had happened was closer to correction. A very large, very old, very damaging pattern of behavior had been interrupted and then ended, and the people it had been harming had been given their lives back, and a species that the galaxy had confidently assessed as minor had turned out to be something quite different. We had not won something. We had returned something that had been taken from others, and in a way, from ourselves, because a species that allows other species to be absorbed without response is slowly agreeing to a world where being absorbed is something that can happen, and we had decided, very clearly, that it could not. I looked at the stars one more time. "Owen," I said, "take us home." The Iron Covenant turned slowly in the empty space of a council system that would never issue another ultimatum, powered up her faster-than-light drive, and began the long journey back. The galaxy would talk about what had happened here for a very long time. I was not naive about that. There would be analyses and debates and arguments, and a great many beings across a great many worlds would spend considerable energy trying to understand exactly what humanity was, and what it was capable of, and what its presence in galactic affairs was going to mean going forward. That was fine. Let them talk. We were going home. The debriefing took 3 weeks. There were committees and reports and a great many people in rooms who wanted to understand every detail of every decision I had made. I answered all their questions. I wrote lengthy accounts of every significant moment in the mission. I sat through long sessions and short ones and formal ones, and ones that were supposed to be informal but were not, and I gave the same honest account every time, because I did not have a different one. On the last day of the debriefing, the senior committee member, a retired admiral named George Hartley, who had white hair, and the kind of eyes that had seen enough of the world to stop being surprised by it, looked at me across the table and said, "Is there anything you believe we should know that you have not yet put in a report?" I thought about that for a moment. "Yes," I said, "one thing." He waited. "The Iron Covenant was the right ship for this mission," I said. "Everything she could do, she needed to be able to do. Dr. Obi and her team built exactly what was required, and the crew operated her exactly as well as she deserved to be operated. I have no criticism of the preparation or the execution. But," Hartley said, because he had been listening carefully enough to know there was one. "The agreement," I said. "The 47 pages, and the new tribunal, and the formal abolition of the policy. Those were good things, important things. But they are words on a document, and words on a document are only as permanent as the people and the structures that support them." "You are concerned about enforcement," he said. "I am concerned about the space between now and 50 years from now," I said. "The agreement exists because we demonstrated something. We demonstrated it clearly. But demonstrations fade in memory. Other problems appear. Attention moves, and the Council is an old, large, complex entity that has been operating in a particular way for a very long time, and the members of that entity who did not want to change will still be there next year and the year after, and the year after that." Hartley was quiet. "What are you recommending?" he asked. "Presence," I said. "Not military presence necessarily. Diplomatic presence. Engaged presence. We need to be part of galactic affairs in a genuine way, not just a threatening way. The Iron Covenant can make the Council careful. But being careful is not the same as changing. The kind of change that actually lasts requires relationships, not just capability." Hartley looked at me for a long time. "That is a significant shift from humanity's historical posture of relative isolation," he said. "Yes," I said. "I know. You think it is necessary. I think it is the difference between having won an argument and having solved a problem, I said. Those are different things. He nodded slowly. He wrote something on his notepad. I did not try to read what it was. 3 months after my debriefing, Earth announced the creation of a permanent diplomatic corps for galactic affairs, the first of its kind in human history. It was staffed with 200 people drawn from diplomatic, academic, scientific, and cultural backgrounds. They were assigned to council space on rotating deployments of 2 years each. I was not part of that corps. I was back in service, on a different assignment, in a different part of space, doing the quiet and continuous work of being present in a universe that was still learning who we were. But I heard about it. And when I heard about it, I allowed myself one moment of something that was not quite pride and not quite relief, but was somewhere in that neighborhood. 6 species were rebuilding their governments and their economies and their cultural institutions on worlds that belonged to them again. A policy that had run for 40 years was gone. An agreement written in 47 pages was being administered by a tribunal that had binding authority. And humanity, a species that the galaxy had confidently decided was minor and manageable, was showing up in force to the ongoing conversation about what kind of place the galaxy was going to be. Not with weapons, with people. Which is, in the end, the only way anything actually changes. I served another 6 years after the mission, then took a position at the Deep Space Command Academy, where I taught navigation and mission planning to a new generation of captains. I kept the mission log from the Iron Covenant on my desk, not as a trophy, not as a monument, just as a reminder of what it had taken to get from the moment Solvan first appeared on the view screen to the moment Earth said, "Come home, Lena." Students sometimes asked about it. I told them the truth. It was not about the ship, and it was not about the weapons, and it was not even really about the mission. It was about the decision that had been made, quietly and over a very long time, to prepare for a moment that everyone hoped would never come, and to prepare for it so thoroughly that when it came, it ended the way it needed to end. You do not prepare for the worst because you expect the worst. You prepare for the worst because you are not willing to accept it. That is the whole answer. That has always been the whole answer. And somewhere in council space, a tribunal was in session, and 6 species were writing their own futures, and the galaxy was a little different from what it had been, because 412 people had gone a very long way from home and done something very difficult, and come back with everyone they had taken. Every last one. Come home, Lena. Yes. We did.